Good morning. We're glad you could be here today. My name is Francis Gibson. For years, I had the opportunity to sit up there, but I've never done this, so I'm going to try not to screw this up too bad. But we are grateful you're here. It's early Saturday morning. It's an early Saturday morning, and what a great day to be here. We live in a great country, great state, and look forward to hearing from our elected officials about some of the things that are happening during the legislative session. But before we go too far, I'd like to thank Scott Barlow and Revere Health for your breakfast. I see the raspberry compote looks very appetizing and successful. Everyone wants that. But we'll just start off really quick. I will have each legislator maybe introduce themselves, what area you represent. Some of you may not know who your representatives are. If you'll just we'll start Representative Welton and just kind of go down the list, just a quick 3 minutes. Who you are, where you're from, how long have you served, and anything else you want us to know about.
Okay, my name is Doug Welton. I represent the South County area, Payson, Santaquin, Elk Ridge, part of Salem, West Mountain. This is my fourth session, so just finishing up the second term. Just a shout out to Superintendent Nelson. Thanks for not firing me yet, since I'm gone most of third term. For those of you who don't know, I'm a school teacher. I teach at Salem Hills High School. And I love this process. I guess one real quick note that has really stuck in my mind a little bit this session is there's a lot of push and pull, and I'm grateful for the way that we're set up. And the House is supposed to be hyper-responsive to the needs of the people, and the Senate is there to temper it. And between that, we get some pretty good solutions that get well vetted, and sometimes they start off a little bit crazy, and usually through the process we end up with some good legislation. And so I'm grateful for that. I think the process is sometimes messy, but it's good. And I work with some really good people up here and in my community. And so thank you for your support, and I'm glad that you're here. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Whyte, and it's a privilege to be with you this morning. Walking into the room, seeing the energy and the collegiality, and everyone Saturday morning at 7:30 a.m. is so impressive. So thank you for being here. I have the opportunity to represent House District 63, which covers Mapleton, about half of Springville, and a great piece of Spanish Fork right here. And I have the privilege of still trying to fill the shoes of former Representative Francis Gibson. Appreciate all of his service and work, and so being able to represent that district. My privilege to be able to be here with my wife, Roxanne, who's just right over here. We have 5 children. My daytime job is I work at Rocky Mountain University of Health Professions, and it's a privilege to be able to serve in the legislature and be able to serve and work with all of you and everyone right up here this morning. So good morning, and thanks for being here.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to work with the folks up at this table. We take on weighty issues, and it's nice to have people with good judgment and a lot of love for our citizens, and that's really why we serve. Like to Doug's point, so I'm Jeff Burton. I represent Spanish Fork, Salem, Woodland Hills, Lake Shore, some of Benjamin, and love what I do here. But we are accessible to you. We hope you feel that way. It gets a little crazy during the session. It's hard to get a hold of us sometimes, but we want you all to have our phone numbers. We put them out regularly, and we will answer you eventually as quickly as we can. You can imagine during the session we're getting 300 emails a day, but we love the process. We love the United States of America. It is an amazing system, and it works, albeit slow sometimes. But I think you will see in the Utah State Legislature some good common sense and the fact that we balance our budget. I'm very proud of that. Many states do not, and we know how to handle the money properly and appropriately. So pleasure to serve and to serve with these gentlemen at the table.
Your district?
Oh, District 64, which is, so I've got most of the population in Spanish Fork. Steve's got the business district, which is very important. But yeah, so Spanish Fork, District 64.
Okay, so Mike McKell, Senate District 25. Let me just start by thanking Francis for being our moderator. When I reached out to him, he told me that he'd have to do his plunge 30 minutes earlier, and I was curious when I heard about his plunge. 2 days ago, he he called me and we were following up, and he was FaceTiming me, and he was sitting in the Springville, I don't know if it's a pond or a lake, the Bartholomew Pond. It was raining, it was dark, and I think he was in the pond this morning, but he served this area incredibly well. For those of you that don't know, Francis is now the new president, CEO of the Hospitals Association, and that's a big deal. He was on Capitol Hill just this week advocating for some rural needs in San Juan County for a hospital that they really need to get it in place. And while he may not be with us here on this board today, he's still advocating for people in need across the state. So a couple committees I serve on. I serve on public education, I serve on higher education, and I serve on both the appropriations and standing committees of business and economic development. It's a good committee. I serve there with Chair Hinkins on that committee, but it's really good to be here. We appreciate our support from the chamber. We appreciate Scott Barlow. This is year 12 where he has provided breakfast with Revere Health. I think that's pretty remarkable. We appreciate that. Scott, they're clapping for you, and they should. And then thank you to Rick Nielsen. Nevo's been a partner right from day one, and we've been here for 12 years, so thank you.
I'm David Hinkins, Senate District 26. I have 9 counties with this new redistricting, so I have Carbon, Emery, Grand, San Juan, and I have Wasatch County, Daniel, Charleston, and Timber Lakes. In Utah County, I have Springville, Mapleton, and Santaquin. And then I have half of Wayne, half of Kane, and half of Garfield. It's a pretty big district. I represent mostly the energy-producing counties of Emery County and Carbon County, coal mines, and I have a really variety of, I also have the Navajo Reservation, Utah Navajos, 12,000 Navajos that live in San Juan County. And so I have a pretty broad spectrum of people that I represent, some of the more colorful people in Moab, Utah, and Castle Valley. And I had the privilege of going into the Senate at the same time that Francis Gibson was in the House, and so we served together for 12 years or 14 years together. And then I've been there this is my 16th session, and so I'm running again for 4 more, and then I'm going to call it quits. But I appreciate any support and help in getting reelected. It's a big district. I have a lot of miles between. It's usually 9 to 10 hour drive from one end to the other. So it can be in California. I live in Farron, Utah, so I'm kind of in the middle of it, so it's not too bad. But appreciate all the support that I've had over the years, especially from Utah County. That's the majority of my population of people. Is probably 50% of the people I represent live in Utah County. So thanks for your support. Appreciate it.
Yeah. My name's Norm Thurston. I represent District 62. District 62 starts at about 300 north in Provo and continues down. On the east side of Springville, goes down to 400 north. On the west side, it pretty much takes almost all of the west side, everything west of Highway 89. Clear out. And thanks to the mayor, somehow I got back a little slice of Spanish Fork again. During redistricting, redistricted me out of Spanish Fork, and he went and bought some land or something. I don't know how the city did it, but he said, we want Norm back in Spanish Fork, so I am now representing about 12 acres or something like that in Spanish Fork. And I'm actually pretty excited about that. And I don't know if you understand kind of what a big deal it is, because as a mayor, to have 3 representatives that you can call at any time, and 2 senators or however many senators you have, it's kind of a big deal. Provo has 4 representatives, Spanish Fork has 3, Springville has 2, and that's kind of a big deal to have multiple representatives for your area. So I'm happy about that.
Well, thank you for introductions. If you'll just write your questions down on the paper, if you'll just hold them up, I'll have someone come and grab them, and we'll start working through them. I'm going to ask the first one just to kind of get us going, because I don't have any other question yet. But I'm going to push this to our senior senator, which would be Senator. I'm going to go to the junior senator. Senator McKell, but then I would go to our senior representative, Representative Thurston, I think is the longest one. But I've been seeing this thing in the paper about DEI. Alphabet soup, DEI, elemental P, QRS, I mean, all these different initials, but DEI. What does that mean? what does DEI mean, and what did the Senate and the House do? And maybe kind of give a perspective from the Senate, and then Norm, if you, or Representative Thurston, if you would, from the House. What, that was a pretty big deal, right? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is alphabet soup. The concern with DEI is just the lack of focus in our institutions. We all believe in diversity. We all believe in equity. We all believe in lifting all members of our society. But we've had some weird focus, and it's mainly been higher education. I think there were some changes in the bill that probably weren't. I mean, they weren't perfect, but the focus was always higher education. We had some diversity statements. Typically, when you apply for a job at a university, they're going to want to look at your CV. CV is the same thing as a resume. It's just a little bit longer, and a CV is going to show all of your academic credentials. But we kind of lost focus along the way, and higher education became very political, and I serve on the Higher Education Committee. So the effort of this bill is to simply say, let's get the politics out of education, let's get it out of higher education, and let's come up with something that works better. Right now, I don't want to pick on the Green School. It's the school we represent, Utah Valley University, but their graduation rate is well below 40%. Okay? And when I say graduation rate, that's a completion rate, not an actual bachelor's degree. We are losing a lot of students, and the idea of the DEI bill was to simply say, let's lift all students. It doesn't matter what race, gender, background. I mean, Senator Hinkins is from Farron. I grew up in Farron. I think there's a lot of disadvantages rural kids have, and we need to lift those kids. So we had a bill that came through. It had a lot of substitutes through the House. We have passed that. The idea is to have just success centers across the state to lift all of our students. One of the concerns for me is, and this isn't racial in any way, we are losing a lot of men are not going to college today. And we're losing them at a high rate, and a lot of just white men are not going to college, and that's just a fact statistically. We're not doing a very good job of including everybody, and the idea is just let's lift everybody together. But thank you, Francis.
Thank you for the question. In the world of advocacy, there's a strategy which is called to hijack somebody else's words. So there are words that are perfectly good words, diversity, so forth, that are perfectly good words that get redefined, and then you don't know what they mean anymore. So things like critical race theory, I would say, get redefined the other way. Critical race theory was this academic, was kind of actually nobody paid attention to it, and then all of a sudden it got branded to mean something that it never was, but now it means something else. And DEI got that same treatment. It got rebranded to mean something else. Anti-racism gets branded to mean something else. So the problem is that activists hijack words, and then if they're asking me, say, well, are you anti-racist? And how do you say no to that, right? How do you say no, I'm not anti-racist? Well, but you don't know what that word means. So this is what was happening on our campuses, is they were asking applicants to sign statements committing to being anti-racist or to being a proponent of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but you don't know what that means because you don't know how someone else is going to interpret it. So I view that bill largely as just taking out some of these fight words, these contentious words, just taking those out of the equation and just saying, we're on campus, we believe that every kid needs a fair shot, regardless of their race, religion, national origin, gender, whatever. Are you willing to be part of that, to give kids a fair shot? And that's what this bill does, is it doesn't really actually remove any of the core concepts. It just takes out some of the labels so that people know what they're trying to accomplish as a university, what they're trying to accomplish as an employee, and ultimately to get us back to our core principles of fairness. Fortunately, fairness hasn't been redefined yet, but I'm waiting for it to be redefined. But just, are we willing to be fair to everybody? So I think that's the ultimate goal of that one. It got labeled as being anti-this, anti-that, or whatever, and it's really not. It's just peeling off all of the baggage, all of the labels, so that someone knows what it is that they're expected to do at work, and what they're expected to do at work, if you're working in university, is treat all the kids the same regardless of, or treat them fairly regardless of their background.
Thank you.
Ask him. He's
Yeah.
bigger than me.
Go ahead.
Is it possible to study the effects of this bill and see how it's meeting the needs, if it's leaving out certain groups?
Oh, for sure. I think every university president, they have all been, everyone that I've talked to, I haven't talked to every single one of them, I've talked to most of them. The one that I've talked to, they are interested in the success of every student. They're interested in helping disadvantaged kids be successful at their universities. And I haven't heard any of them tell me that they think this is going to hinder them in any way in doing those efforts. A couple of them think it's actually going to be helpful. So yes, I'm sure the university presidents are all over that.
So each of you have questions. I've tried to hand them out. As you write a question, if you know who you want it to be towards, so Representative McKell, Senator McKell or Representative Burton, whoever it is, just write it on there and I'll get it to them. But Representative Hinkins, we'll start with your question.
Okay, mine for me and Senator McKell, it says, as horse racers, when can I bet in Utah on your horses? There you go. Well, I'll tell you what, he and I had a bet the other day.
Hold on. Let him go. This is good. Come on.
Okay, so Senator McKell and I, we both have horses running in Los Alamitos in California right now, and so we had a friendly wager ourselves of $100 apiece, and he has, his horse was the favorite on the tote board, and mine was not, and so he wanted to bet $100 that his horse would outrun mine, and so I took him up on it. I said, I wouldn't bet straight across. You have to give me the other 8 horses in the race, which he did. But I lost $100 to him. I had 9 horses, and he only had 1, and he still ended up. So we have betting, but we always have in Utah. But we're trying to get parimutuel racing along. I tried to do that a few years ago, and to no avail. I didn't get out of. Well, it did get out of. It got a committee assignment, but I could see that I wasn't going to get it out of committee, so I withpulled my bill, and so I still got a ways to go. So, but the governor said he would. When Governor Herbert was there, he said he wouldn't sign it anyway because his father, Paul Peters, was a horse racer, and he said it turned good man bad. So anyway, that's the way it goes.
Representative Whyte. Yes. I think it was House Bill 285.
Yeah, thank you. The question is, what is the rationale behind HB 285? Why bother? So that's a good question. So HB, I just looked it up here and been involved in this just a little bit. HB 285 is a bill that's called Labor Union Amendments. So this bill was presented a week ago to the House Business and Labor Committee, and it's now going through the process here. The bill is about specifically related to public labor unions. So in the state, there are a lot of different public labor unions where state and public employees are a part of. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, I've noticed in the media and on social media. So when this bill was brought towards the committee, I asked the bill sponsor several questions. The very first question was, what is the underlying problem this bill attempts to address? And so the reason and the rationale that the sponsor of this bill is wanting to move it forward, that there is a couple of things that have been identified. One is that public labor unions have not had an opportunity to recertify for a long time. Another reason is that there's concerns about members having difficulty leaving their public labor union. Another rationale that was explained to the committee is that some public labor unions are affiliated with national unions, and the national union's agendas are not what the local public union wants. And then another rationale that was explained to the committee is that there's a desire to ensure that public employees control the public labor unions and that the public labor unions don't control the public employees. And so that was the reason for asking the question, why bother? Those were the reasons that were explained to the committee about why this bill is being presented and going forward. I believe when it was presented in the committee, there was 8 that supported and 2 that voted against. And so with the majority, that bill is now moving forward, so it will now come before the full House of Representatives. So that's a little bit behind about HB 285. So thanks for asking.
Norm, you want to weigh in? Sure. I mean, I can tell you where I'm going to vote on it. I mean, I know Norm voted against it. When it hits the Senate, I'm going to vote against it. I don't love unions, but if you want to pay $40 to a union, that's your decision, not mine. to me, I'm probably in the why bother camp on that bill, and it's okay that we disagree on that bill. I've never loved unions, but if you want to pay $30 a month for a subscription to Sports Illustrated, I mean, that's kind of your business. But Norm, yeah.
Yeah, so I have voted against it in committee because of, there are some provisions in there that I really don't like. And this is, now you're gonna get politics 101 lesson. The sponsor came to me and he said, what don't you like about it? And I said, well, here are the three most egregious things that I find in the bill having to do with this, this, and this. And there will be a new version of the bill coming out that addresses those three things. I still don't like everything in the bill, but kind of what you got to do is if somebody comes to you and says, hey, help me fix my bill, and they give you everything that you ask for, you kind of have to support it at that point, I would say, if you want anybody to ever help you again on anything, right? So I looked at I haven't seen the final version of it yet, but based on the conversation that I had, it's not a perfect bill. It doesn't have everything that I wanted, but it has almost everything that I asked for. So I will probably, if that version is the version, if it says what he's supposed to say, I will be a yes on the House floor. But yeah, we'll see how it goes and see if he's got votes beyond that.
Yeah, I don't know if the substitute, the amendments, I can look it up here, if it's been publicly posted, if it's out there.
Is there a third sub?
It's the third substitute out there.
I haven't seen it yet, so
Yeah,
I don't know.
I haven't either.
And what were your amendments that you proposed?
So what I was worried about was there's a difference between unions that do collective bargaining and unions that don't. So I wanted the unions that don't do collective bargaining to basically be exempted from most of the provisions of the bill, and we were able to get that one. The ability to still collect those union dues through payroll deduction if the union is willing to pay for the fees, because that was not going to be allowed, and now it's going to be allowed again. And there was one more. I've had a lot of thoughts this week, and I've lost that one. There was one more thing.
So in order to hear from everyone, I'm just gonna I've given out questions, I think, to everybody, and
I'd like
most
to
of them-
answer, I'd like to add to that one, though, if I
Go ahead.
could. I've been meeting with the union leaders, and I meet with them every morning Wednesday morning at 6:30, and with the IBEW as well as the UEA union leaders and all that. And there was a board, we had it in a state statute that was in the 1960s, that rather than going to the National Labor Board for all their problems and stuff, there was actually a state board that was created, and they're going to try and resurrect that again. And so we don't have to, we'll deal with the union issues within the state rather than nationally. And I think that'll put a lot of this hate and discontent to rest. And so we're working at that. So I hope we can get support from the legislature to try, because where I live, I have the United Electrical Workers and United Mine Workers, and we are a pro-union counties. Carbon's always been pro-union, but we also have all of our power plant workers and stuff at the Hunter and Huntington plant that are union, and we hate to see communities being divided by unions, just like we hate to see Democrats and Republicans. Just because we have different opinions don't mean we shouldn't get along. And so we're working and it's a state issue. I mean, labor is a state issue, not a federal issue. So if we can do away with the National Labor Board disputes and do it within state, that's our goal.
All right, representatives, I'm not going to put you on official timer, but the questions are rolling in, so we're going to get going. Representative Welton, we haven't heard from you. I've given you a couple. If you'll just address those, that'd be great.
Okay, my question deals with teacher retention. It says I work as a substitute teacher. I won't read all of it, part of it, but from what I see and hear, teacher retention is not just about higher salaries. It's about how they are treated by students, parents, and by the legislature, and it goes on into detail a little bit. And I would agree, first of all. I would straight up agree that teacher retention is not just about salaries. That helps, and let me just back up on that. So last year we had a historic increase in teacher pay. The union and the district negotiated the pay schedule, and they came out, and it's the last month of school, and I'm sitting in the faculty room, and I remember one new teacher came in, and she looked at the new pay, and she's like, "Is this real? Is this real?" I was ready to quit because I couldn't make ends meet. And she's like a single mom, and she's like, this is not, and so because of that, we were able to retain a really good teacher. So that is part of it, but It is kind of hard when you feel like you're under attack all the time. And one of my concerns that I've had and that I brought up with leadership is there's some real issues in education. There's real issues in law enforcement and accounting and every profession that you look into. Sometimes ours get magnified a little bit because we're public employees. But my request has always been that we take a scalpel to solve the issue, not a sledgehammer. And I think sometimes what we've done, I mean, with the DEI bill, there's a lot of really, really good stuff in that needed to happen. But it kind of felt like they took a sledgehammer to it, and they took all the pieces to it and duct taped it back together. And so it's good. It's going to move us in the right step forward, and I think there's a lot of really good provisions in that. But I guess what I would say is it's easy to augment the negative. You know, you see something that's bad comes up, and then everybody shares it, and it goes viral. But if somebody says something good, we don't talk about that as much, right? We have, I don't want to get too specific on names or anything else like that, but I was talking to a reporter last year on a bill that I was running, and the reporter in his bio says, hey, I love feel-good stories. And I just talked to him about that, and I said, gosh, I would love to see more feel-good stories. He says, I would love to do feel-good stories all the time about the good things that we're doing in our community. But we can see minute by minute how our viewership drops when we switch from crisis in the classroom to, hey, look at this great thing that Spanish Fork High School is doing. Like, viewership drops, and so they're responsive to the public. So I guess my request to you is amplify the good voices, amplify the good things that your teachers are doing. They're doing amazing things. On the other side, we have increased teacher pay. We've got some great programs, Grow Your Teacher, where you can grow into like master's programs and counselor programs, and you can switch over. We have some paid training days. Teachers were always doing training in the summer unpaid, and now we've got the ability to get some of those days paid. There is a bill on merit pay. I'm not sure, I haven't looked at it in depth. I'm not sure I love that one, but we'll look at it closely, and maybe I will. Anyway, yeah, your teachers do a great job. Let me just say we've got world-class educators in the state of Utah, and they do fantastic work. And we're in a digital age where you see something happen in Massachusetts, and it gets magnified, and you think everybody's doing it, and that's not the case. So,
Thank you. Representative Burton.
Okay, again, good morning. I didn't tell you, I'm the chair of the Executive Office of Appropriations and Criminal Justice, also on business and labor, so we get all the interesting incendiary bills that you've heard about already. I'm the alcohol policy lead for Utah, so that takes up a lot of my time. We want to keep Utah, and alcohol is a big part of that and how we distribute it. And then finally, the chair of the Utah County Caucus, and what we're trying to do with Utah County is punch above our weight. We've always, I feel like, punched a little below our weight. And as we grow, fastest growing county in the state, our voice needs to be heard. We have 22 or 3 legislators representing Utah County now. And so we're striving to bring our power together when it comes to big issues on the Hill. And so got a couple of quick questions here. Law enforcement seems to be my emphasis. I spent most of the summer you may or may not have been tracking how messed up our prison system has been. Our assaults went up dramatically last summer based on the construction of the new prison, which isn't optimal. And we could talk about that all day long. But we've made some huge improvements. If you look at the statistics, the average prison guard in the United States of America lives how many years? 59 years. That ought to tell you how toxic that environment is. And it's out of our sight and out of our mind a little bit, but these folks sacrifice a great deal for us, and so we need to do all that we can to support them. We're 400 short on our prison guards, and we're working very hard on recruiting and retention. We hired a really amazing executive director finally, who will improve morale out there and improve our safety. The other thing that wasn't happening at the prison is there was no training given to those folks until they got a parole date. So they would go out and recidivate, recommit crimes, and come right back into the prison. So we're working to improve that so that they're more prepared when they hit the street. I got a question on a couple of bills I'll answer real quick. House Bill 355, for any of you that are renters, this is a tough economy that we're in with inflation, with rental increases. This was a Marcia Judkins bill that called for landlords to notify renters of a rent increase and give them 60 days prior to that rent going up. The only carve out there was that if you were renegotiating a contract with a renter, you could do it under the 60 days when you rewrote the contract. That passed out of committee. We thought it was a fair bill for landlords to give folks 60 days for a rental increase. The next one was, and this is kind of volatile when you think about it, HB 165. We've not heard it yet, but it essentially says that if you are a federal law enforcement officer like the FBI and you want to go into a home in Utah County, you must have the written permission of Sheriff Mike Smith before you do that. The driver on this is some of the things we've heard recently. The man in Provo that was killed by the FBI. Some of you may have been tracking that. I do believe in more cooperation between federal and state and local agencies. Sometimes there's a little bit of animus there, and I don't really understand it. It shouldn't be that way. But I will tell you that having been in law enforcement most of my life on the military side, that some of the things our federal law enforcement do don't need to be done. They overreact sometimes, and I think cooler heads should prevail, and that cooler head is usually a local law enforcement officer. So I support more coordination between law enforcement. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, somebody asked about the bathroom bill real quick, the transgender bathroom bill. How many of you still have kids at home? I'm just kind of curious. And how many are grandparents like me? Okay. How many of you are concerned about what you're seeing in our society with regard to sexuality and kind of some of the changes that we're faced with? If we have anything in our society, it is confusion. And I would argue that part of that is by design. There are groups out there that are seeking to confuse, certainly seeking to confuse our children. And if you're an adult, I think you're confused too, because I feel it. The bathroom bill, I think, had good intentions. It was designed around, keeping our children safe, keeping our children innocent. It ended up, after much argument, negotiation, it turned out to be about what we already have. If you go into the wrong bathroom and you perform acts that shouldn't be done in the bathroom, you will be arrested. And that's pretty much what it is. Our heart goes out to everyone. We love everybody, but that doesn't mean that we sacrifice our principles. And I'm a person that believes in standing on principle. I do that whether it's popular or not. That's what we should do. What I hear from my constituents all the time is, I elected you to be a certain way. Don't go up there and be a different way. And so what I strive to do is be who you think I am, why you elected me. And I think, and then be accountable to you if there's a problem, an aberration. And I've got a bunch more questions, but I'll stop there, and just say, everybody's angry. If you look at the Marxist playbook, it's to divide and conquer. That's exactly what they've always done. They divide along lines, ideas. It's called identity politics. You've heard it. We've got to quit that. And remember that we're Americans first, and be friends with each other. That doesn't mean we have to sacrifice our principles. Thanks.
I think we should clap.
Yeah.
Representative McKell, you've got a few.
Let me go through two of these questions, but isn't it cool we have a general in the legislature? We actually have two generals in the legislature, with General Peterson and General Burton, and it's always a privilege to serve with him. I'd go in battle with him for sure. I probably want to stand behind him though and let him go out front. But it's fantastic. Chad Bunn, I'm going to answer your question. You're worried about Highway 6. I think a lot of you are worried about Highway 6. What are we doing on Highway 6? Former Representative Gibson was fighting for Highway 6 because we needed a new interchange over by the hospital, over by the Smith Ford. Now it's Tim Dolly Ford. That has been funded. It was actually Francis that put that money in, got that funded. Project took a little longer than we had expected. The economy and inflation, which you're all feeling, happened. We had to put in some additional money. That is fully funded. You should see that project rolling out and over the course of the next few months. That's going to happen. Highway 6 is a problem. So we're working on that, Chad. The other thing on Highway 6 that we're working on this legislative session, I've got it's called an RFA. That's a request for appropriation. We need to realign the railroad. 2 years ago or a year ago, we put some money in the budget to start the rail realignment along Highway 6. That money was contingent on a federal grant. It's called a Chrissy Railroad Grant, and it's just matching money from the federal government to do that. The federal government has come back and said, look, you're not quite ready. You need to do your environmental impact study. So we're asking for the money to do the study, some of the engineering on that. If we get that funded, which I think we will, that's 11 at-grade crossings that we'll be able to close down. That's 20 new rail crossings that we can improve. So that's a big issue. That'll make our Highway 6 much better for Springville, Mapleton, and Spanish Forks. We're working on that. One of the other questions, I'm gonna save a couple of these for next time. HB 78, repealing the sunset date on motion picture incentives. Are there any consequences, present or future, if this passes? And the truth is not, I mean, whoever asked this question, the truth is not really the way the bill is written. So we call it motion picture incentives. Those incentives are based typically on post-performance, and it's more like a tax cut to a targeted industry. Our film incentives typically happen in areas that Senator Hinkins represents, and it's a way to help bolster rural Utah. A lot of the filming happens in rural Utah, has significant impact, financial, and lifts these communities. That's why we do it. But the question is, does repealing the sunset date would just simply say the program continues indefinitely, but it's not really true in the bill, because if this bill passes, the sunset date is repealed, but there's a mandatory reporting requirement to the Business and Economic Development Committee, which I chair, and that would happen every 2 years. So the legislature would continue to have oversight. We do look at ways to help bolster rural Utah. It's a little harder out there, and this is a program that we use to do that. So the short answer is, will it have a big impact if it passes? I don't think so, because the oversight continues and it's statutory, and there's going to be a statutory report regardless of whether or not it passes. So those are my two for now.
I would like to add to that on the 78, House Bill 78. They actually have to show the receipts that they spent in that rural area. If they're in Kanab, they have to show those receipts. So if they've made part of the movie in California, that doesn't count. But if they make it in Moab or Monument Valley, then as long as they have a receipt for it, then they'll get credit for it. So it really does help for rural Utah, the hotels, and also the stand-in actors and all that sort of stuff. So my question was energy security. Do you think the state should own the power plant? And this is mostly for the IPP power plant. We're not talking about the state takeover of the Huntington plants, or the Bonanza plant, but IPA or IPP plant in Delta, Utah. They're wanting to decommission it. It's the newest plant in the United States, pretty much, and it's even though it's 35 years old, we've really neglected our coal-fired plants in the nation, and so they're really outdated. Instead of putting some of the money, the coals get subsidized by about $50 billion a year, but wind and solar gets $800 million and $600 million, so $1 billion, not million, $1 billion to wind and solar, and nuclear gets about $13 billion. And so when you really, if we'd put some of our green energy money into some newer technology for carbon sequestration for these plants, they would be more feasible. But I think we're going to be looking at blackouts, me personally, and like California starting to have some brownouts, and I think we're going to be Utah. One of the problems we've had is, even though we have the coal plants operating, they're only allowing them to have a 2-year contract on their coal, and so when you go to buy a $80 million, what's that?
Who is they? You said they won't allow.
The EPA mostly.
Oh, the federal government.
Federal government, and also. Because of the closures, the power plants actually can't enter into long-term contracts, even with the Public Service Commission, because they used to have 10-year contracts. Now they're going to 2-year contracts because they never know when the government's going to step in and close these plants. We spent $600 million as ratepayers on the Hunter Power Plant for a bag house, and these plants are really clean burning plants. There's hardly any particulates. I mean, CO2 comes out of it, of course, combustion, the same as our vehicles, but we aren't getting the credit, so we are, and we never do enough. If we meet one level, they just raise the bar, and that's the air standards and the air quality. And so now we're going on vision I'm just trying to encourage our government to allow us to do more technology. We're trying to do an energy center in Orangeville, and we bought a combustion chamber that we got from the University of Utah that spent millions of dollars, and because they'd lost their rent on that building, they was going to scrap this piece of equipment, and we were able to move that to Orangeville because that's our interest, is to keep the Hunter and Huntington plants operational. And so this teaches us to burn cleaner fuels and a mixture of fuels with wood that they're trying to knock down the sulfuric acid coming out. And so we're doing all kinds of test trials, and it's being successful. But we're going to be using a new technology, hopefully, that won't use near the water. But if we'd have put any type of money into it that we have into the solar and wind as a nation, we would be running clean coal power plants that are very clean, which, like I said, I feel that ours are clean anyway, but it doesn't seem to matter anyway. We're doing all we can as a state under the federal regulations.
So I think a lot of the IPP issues become as it converted from coal. And
California's just gone off.
Power was sold to California, and the California said, we don't want coal power.
Exactly. 95% of the power out of the IPP goes to California, and they're saying they don't want to take that. So they're putting in supposedly hydrogen plants, burning clean hydrogen plants with natural gas. And that may work and it may not. It's new technology, so you never know. But as a legislature, we've catered to IPP. We've written over 35 bills to make it easy for them, and it's kind of backfired on us. So we're trying to pull back what we've done. So,
Representative Thurston.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to do two of these, if I can be quickly. The first one, would you vote in favor of a bill requiring all ecclesiastical leaders to report abuse? And the answer is no, but maybe not for the reason why you would suspect. It has to do with my conversations with the Catholic diocese, which I didn't know a lot about. It's this question of all ecclesiastical leaders. The problem is that when we start saying all or everyone, and then the next thing is church, now it becomes real problematic, because the Catholic doctrine is very different. When a person goes to confession, the doctrine of what that is and what that means to a Catholic is very different than, for example, if Mike McKell is going to go talk to his bishop about something.
I might have to rebuttal. I do have that bill in the Senate.
It's a very different doctrine. It's a very different belief. It's a very different system of conscience. So while I think and I would support, I believe, and we could probably find out real quick, that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, maybe this isn't such a big deal for them if it was to happen. When you talk to the Catholic Church, it's a pretty big deal. And so unless the Catholic Church is going to come and tell me, hey, we've worked out something that we can still make this workable, I'm here to fight for religious minorities, people who are different than me, but who might be oppressed by this. So that's something. It sounds like we'll have to talk. Maybe we'll meet at the stake president's office. We'll work this out. All right, so what's the issue that HB 214 is trying to address? So HB 214 basically says, well, but not basically, it says that if you are going to return your ballot by mail, instead of the drop box or instead of in person or some other way, if you're going to return your ballot by mail, it must be received by the clerk by the close of elections on Tuesday night, just like all of the other ballots. You don't get a free pass just because you're choosing to use the mail. Now, as we've had discussions about that, there are some practical issues with it, especially part of the area that Senator Hinkins represents, because there are some things are different. And so we've had some conversations with the rural clerks, in particular elections officials down in San Juan County and other areas, to try to figure out how to make this work. The issue that's trying to address is this. I don't know if you're as frustrated as I am. I like to wake up on Wednesday morning and have some idea of what the results were. But you turn into statewide elections in the state of Utah, and they'll say, we don't know. We've got 30% of the ballots counted, and that's mostly because Salt Lake County hasn't really done anything. And so I talk to the county and say, what's going on? How come you can't get the ballots counted? Give you an example. Argentina had a national election for president. The polls closed at 6 p.m. At 8 p.m., so 2 hours later, 92% of precincts had reported in a national election. Like, why can't we do that? And so talking to the clerks and understanding why we can't do that, and there are reasons, they have reasons for that, and trying to remove those reasons so that we can get better and faster election results reported. Part of the issue is that they don't have the ballots, that the ballots come in, they get this huge batch on Tuesday late afternoon, and so they've got to process all of those, verify the signatures, whatever has to be done. But then it continues to what they call trickle in, and by trickle in, we're trying to actually quantify it. They didn't collect data on that the last go around for the elections, so we're going to try to collect data on that for this go around of the elections. One thing I do want to point out to everybody, and this is not a political statement at all, it's a practical statement. Do not assume that if you drop your ballot in the mail on Monday that it will be counted. There are lots of things that can go wrong, and I'm not blaming any for that. That's just how the world works. They could get delayed postmark. It could not get postmarked. It might not get postmarked at all. It might get misdelivered. It might get mishandled. It might come to the clerk's office, and then you have to cure the ballot. There's an issue with your ballot, and then there's no time to cure the ballot. 100% encourage everybody to, whatever you do, make sure that your ballot is in the hands of the county clerk as early as possible. But in my world, no later than election day, or preferably even the day before. That dramatically increases the probability that your ballot is going to get counted. Getting it in early, getting it in on time for sure, but early is even better. So that's my two for now.
Representative Whyte.
Thank you. I'll answer two questions here. First one, what is the status of that new interchange off the interstate between Springville and Spanish Fork? UDOT is planning to be able to start construction this year. However, a little update I got from the mayor of Springville yesterday afternoon is that UDOT is saying that some of that might not happen because of additional costs because of inflation. I don't know what the situation is there, so I'll be visiting with UDOT on Monday to find out what the situation is. Yes. This is actually something Francis worked on for many, many years, being able to get the funding and the approval there to be able to have this happen.
The bane of my existence, that exit.
The Francis Gibson connector.
So that,
It's the Gibson interchange.
it is,
That's what we refer to it on Capitol Hill. That's very true.
I may or may not have acted a fool trying to get the funding for that, but it is out for plan and design right now, and latter part of this year, construction will happen. There are still battles with the railroad. I know that's unheard of. And so right now, it will be 2 lanes each way, an exit off the freeway and going eastward toward State Street, and it will stop just past the first railroad before it gets to the second. I'm working with UP to try to get that crossing decommissioned, and then at that point, it can go forward. And as everything in life, it's going to take additional funds, and so I may come back to you guys to ask for that, although I'm not a lobbyist, but I would argue for that. But that is the process, and so it is out for bid. UDOT has said it will start construction hopefully latter part of this year.
Thank you. So depending upon too what UDOT tells me on Monday, I might be making some other phone calls for some help to be able to get that across the finish line. Next question, what do you think we can do to end the divisiveness in our communities, state, and nation? How would you work on fighting divisiveness? Boy, isn't that a great question? I think Representative Burton did such a good job of talking about that just a couple of minutes ago. This is my 3rd session, and when I first went up there, it made me wonder, what would this be like? Would it be potentially like what we're seeing back east in D.C.? And I have to tell you, that end of that first session, I walked away actually being inspired about the state of Utah and how Utah approaches and works together. Can I give you just a couple of quick examples, and then I'll answer your question of things I've seen and maybe some thoughts for all of us to consider. The very first one, first session, there was a bill that was presented by a Democrat in the House of Representatives related to education. Our superintendent, good superintendent, put that on my notice saying, I have concerns with this and I would recommend you vote against it. I found out a little bit what the concerns were, went to the Democrat representative with the bill saying, based upon this, what I'm sharing, I'm not feeling comfortable with this bill. And I said, would you potentially be open to visiting with the superintendent? And she was like, yes. And our superintendent was willing to be able to visit with her. We got together, expressed the concerns, and she said, I had never thought about that particular implication. And what would you suggest? Our superintendent suggested some language to be able to fix those concerns. She said, that makes sense to me. It was adopted as an amendment, and it went through and got passed. I thought, what a great example of people being able to work together to be able to get the good policy. That happens more and more so than we hear about in the media and on social media. That's really how Utah works. So following that pattern, I think, is a way to be able to end divisiveness. A couple other thoughts this morning is what we're all doing here this morning, early on a Saturday morning, getting together, wanting to be involved, working together and coming together collaboratively, civilly talking about issues and working together. This type of thing is so beneficial of continuing to do that. I think also giving each other the benefit of the doubt. If something happens, think, well, let's find out a little bit more about this before jumping to a conclusion. I'll give you an example this last week. There's a lot of interest in housing, and I serve as the co-chair of the Commission on Housing Affordability for the state. Did a lot of media interviews, and KSL did a story. They attributed another person's quote to myself in the media that has no reflection of my feelings or position, and it's out there in the news statewide. I so much appreciated a friend down the street from me saying, I saw this. Can you tell me about this a little bit more? The approach was so nice. I said, oh, here's the skinny. It came out, it was wrong. We're working on getting it corrected really fast. The issue is corrected by the media. Send it to the person, and she goes, oh, thank you. That makes so much sense. So giving a little bit of benefit of the doubt and understanding sometimes things that we see out there may not be accurate.
Representative Salt Lake Tribune is always true.
So, I think also just listening and learning, before the session, it's my greatest privilege to be able to do town halls, to be able to listen and to learn. And after the session, doing town halls to be accountable and to report back. And having that open communication and people working together, it's so great. It's interesting, just a little piece too. Look back over the last 3 weeks of all the bills that have been passed in the legislature so far. You're going to see that, I don't know a stat, I haven't run them, in the high 90% are completely unanimous. Democrats, Republicans working together on bills to be able to do that. So what we're seeing here in the state is so good if we can keep doing that, but it is a bit divisive out there, but I think some of those principles and examples might be some things for us to consider. Thanks for asking that good question. Those were my 2 questions.
Representative Whyte, just to add to that, sitting where you've sat, or you're sitting now, and I've sat there before, and being on the outside, divisiveness sells. Unity is not popular. There's a reason when you watch the news, it's train wrecks and murders and this and that. And at the very end, you get this young girl who had a lemonade stand who raised money to do something nice, right? And that tends to sell. I worked with a great lady for a long time, and I'll introduce her a little bit later, but her mantra is assume good intent. And immediately your motives for why you vote, your motives for what you do, the reason a neighbor does something, there's got to be a reason behind it, as opposed to I'm just trying to be nice. So we'll continue.
I agree. Can I give one more example? I see a good man right here in the middle of the room. He came up and visited with me in the Capitol earlier this week about a concern with the bill. And we talked for about 45 minutes or so. And they had some concerns with the bill, one of the bills that we talked about up here. The approach, the reason, the rationale that was explained, and talking through that and understanding different perspectives, boy, I so much appreciated it. And just the approach and being able to visit and express concerns and talk through those and through a part of the process is just another example of someone right here in the middle of the room that just did that this last week as well. So thank you.
I'd like to think that most people, when you wake up in the morning, you don't say, how can I be a pain today? My goal is to be a pain today. Let's have a discussion if that's who you are, but most people don't think that way.
Can I just add, just quickly, just a little tidbit? Representative Welton and I often stay up at Salt Lake during the week because it's just, the drive's too much. And on a regular basis, we go out to dinner with colleagues. I would say more than half of the time, it's with our friends who are Democrats. And we talk about sometimes politics, but generally not. We talk about other stuff and just get to know each other as people. And I think for all of us, some of those Democrats or people who are liberals or whatever you want to view them as are some of our best friends, actually. So if I had to pick from the list of people who I want to have lunch with, they'd be on that list.
Representative Welton.
Well, if I can chime in on that a little bit as well, too. One of my favorite quotes, I think it's from Brene Brown. I'm not sure. My wife gave it to me. But she said, it's hard to hate up close, so lean in. And I think the better we get to know each other and we create those relationships in our communities, we don't always agree. I don't always agree with my wife. I don't always agree with my family. My children don't always agree with me, and the decisions that I make at the Capitol and home. But I have found, to use another quote from Luke Bryant, I think it's Luke Bryant, I believe most people are good. And I think people are good, and they're trying to do their best from the world that they understand it, and we do need to give them the benefit of the doubt. As a debate teacher, I teach kids to engage in ideas, to research, to think critically. But when they go out into the world, I have to have several discussions at the end that this is not a zero-sum game, and we want you to use your skills and your abilities to make good decisions and to engage in meaningful discussion and to find those places. Because sometimes when we come in, and I always think about this with the Constitution, right? If you didn't have the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, we might not have had the Second Amendment or the First Amendment or some of those things like that, but it was being able to have that conversation and see where your blind spots are, and then you say, all right, here's where I'm not going to move on, but here's where we can get together, and I think that's really important. So I appreciate that question on how do we end divisiveness. I think it's important, and I think we're good people and we're stronger together. So thanks for asking that question or asked that. All right, HB 257, the bathroom bill, this was already talked about a little bit. How will it be enforced? Citizen reporting. We worried that it'll turn into a witch hunt. This is a hard one. I'm going to agree with General Burton. I think up until a few years ago, we've had males and female bathrooms, and it's not been an issue that we've had to really address. Not to say that there haven't been spots here and there throughout history. I think the bill did a pretty good job. In fact, the bill kind of, what I've seen in the education system, it kind of represents what actually is already in practice. So you have male restrooms and female restrooms, and then there are individuals that may think differently, and so they have plans in place where they provide them for single-use restrooms where they can go and use those. So they don't have to worry about being bullied, and they don't have to worry about any of those other things. That's kind of in practice already, and so we haven't done this. There is some concern about the citizen reporting, and I've got to say I'm not sure what the mechanism is for sure. I tried to read through that, and it's pretty long, and I can't remember what it is. I would say the one concern that I do have is that we're not like on a witch hunt, for example, and we've had 3 instances in the last year where we've had our female athletes in high school that have been accused of being transgender, and they're not. And that's been extremely damaging to them. On the same side, there's concerns about equity and fairness for our women in sports, and that they're competing against biological women, and so we need to make sure we do that. So the bigger piece on this bill, as I understand it, is it's changing rooms where you are exposing anatomy, and that's where your changes are, and that's where the harsher punishments are. So you can't do that unless you've got surgically changed. Why am I answering this one? I don't like this one. Anyway, but that's kind of the issue right there. And so if you are anatomically the same, then you can go into the changing rooms. But there are some concerns there, and I see more and more students coming in I tend to think it's more environmental, and that's not to demean anybody who might be in that fit in that world. But there are more and more people, whether we like it or not, that are dealing with these issues. And so I think it's important that we understand that we're human beings first. In the Republican Party, well, never mind. The two great commandments for me, I'm going to talk about my personal beliefs, is to love God and to love thy fellow man. And I think we treat people well, and what that means to different people is a little bit different, but I think if we do that, we don't need as many laws and rules and regulations, and we're going to be better as a society. I'm now going to transition to a bill that wasn't asked about because it's made the news a little bit. I do have a potty training bill that's made the news a little bit. We've had an increase in requests from kindergarten teachers saying, we've got like a 4-time increase in kids who are coming into kindergarten who are not potty trained. And it creates a liability for teachers. It creates a safety issue for our teachers and our students. And it doesn't seem like this is something that should be a bill, but it is a bill that I'm running through that says if you're going to go into kindergarten, you have to be potty trained. If not, we will provide some social services and some support. It does exclude 504s and IEPs because there are some real situations that our children have. But other than that, that's what it says. So I think it'll help out our kindergarten children. They'll be able to focus on education and not other things that could be difficult for them.
Thank you. Representative Burton.
Okay, really quickly, I got a couple law enforcement questions, and I'll just answer them by saying this. We have more law enforcement supportive bills this year than I've ever seen in my 4 years up there. And the good news is I just read a survey back in 2021 when all the defund police bills were out there. And one of the reasons they stuck me on that committee was to crush some of those stupid bills. But the reality, no, sorry. No, but the survey said in 2021 that 60+% of law enforcement was leaving the profession. And the survey run again this year, it's less than 20%. How about that? So that's been turned around. These folks are the thin line between order and chaos. We love them, we support them, unless they misbehave, and they understand that. And then it was asked whether or not Senator McKell and I approve of what Texas is doing on the border. Look, the federal government the President of the United States doesn't have a lot of jobs, really. If it weren't for executive orders, I don't know what he'd do some of the day. Maybe just have meetings. But the President is responsible for providing safety and security. The President is responsible for securing our border. The President is not doing that. And do I take it lightly that Texas is overlooking a Supreme Court decision? No. But it's very unfortunate that Texas has been put in the position they're in. And so, in principle, I support Texas protecting the border and look, these are some nefarious people coming in. These are not people from Mexico. If you look at the mix of who's coming into our country, many of them are from another continent. They're not even from South America. So we've got to protect our borders. And the last thing I'll say real quick in the interest of time, I wanted to talk on this. We are pushing back hard on energy, just so you know. The EPA mandates are ridiculous. We can't meet them. If there were no cars in these valleys, 0 cars, we still couldn't meet the EPA requirements. And so it's foolish. And the green energy plan is deficient. Why is it deficient? Because we can't get from here to there. Solar is 1880s technology. The wind is 1890s technology. We need a lot more investment. And so rather than have you go cold in your house and have no lights, the state of Utah is pushing back on the federal government when it comes to energy to keep some of these plants in order and to maybe store some of that energy so when California goes black, they can maybe come to us and buy some of our excess power.
I don't think the general could have said it any better on the border. I agree with everything he just said. I think it's something we pay attention to, and how do we support our law enforcement here, because it will trickle north, and I look at it, and I appreciate the fact that we've got Representative Burton pushing back on this idea that we defund the police and we do terrible things to law enforcement. I know Chief James just hired a new officer in Salem. We had the chiefs up this week. I think we all had a chance to meet with the chiefs. They had one applicant. Thankfully, the applicant was very, very good, and they were able to make that hire. But we're not getting the applications, and that should concern all of us. This is more of a logistical cost question. This is from the mayor of Spanish Fork. I know Mike is here. He's asking about Spanish Fork Fire and EMS. Logistically, Spanish Fork Fire and EMS The resources that they have are for Spanish Fork. But the responsibility to take care of Highway 6 is a responsibility that Spanish Fork is assuming more and more and more. You're seeing a lot of fatalities, a lot of work and a lot of effort that goes on up Highway 6. I think we're to the point where we probably need to add another team, and that's something we're going to look at for funding either from the county or the state. We're servicing an area that's not within our city, and the city ought to have some compensation to do that. I think they want to do that job. I think they do a great job. Our EMS guys are great, but we need to make sure that the cost is borne by not just the residents of Spanish Fork. Let me answer one other question here, and then I've got one little announcement I want to make sure you're all aware of. House Bill 272 is a House bill Paul Cutler is running. I'm running this bill with him. We're naming it Ohm's Law. There was a 16-year-old boy that was murdered by his father. And this case involved a custody evaluation and a prolonged custody battle divorce case. The question says, how will the bill ensure experts advising family on family reunification are qualified? This is a bigger issue than people realize. You probably saw some kids that barricaded themselves in their basement in Salem. There is a cottage industry, and I'm going to be offensive with this. There's a cottage industry with attorneys and reunification therapists using junk science, and it's hurting a lot of women. These cases are disproportionately against women, and what happens in a case is you'll have a husband who is very, very abusive, just like in the Ohms Moses case. And what happens is, to get around that abuse and to try to convince the court to give father more visitation, more custody, when it may not be in the best interest of the child because of the harm to the child and the real threats of abuse, there are custody evaluators that have come up with a creative theory called parental alienation and reunification camps. And I've met with some of the leading experts in the world who say that, and your CPT codes as medical providers, it's not a treatment. It's not entirely junk science. The default is mom and dad should be involved. So we have a bill to kind of deal with that. So courts are going to be required to look at actual experts and to balance and not ignore abuse. And these are disproportionately hurting women in our state. You're going to see a hearing we're going to do a press conference. Leah Moses, who lost her son, he was murdered by his father. That was a 14-year divorce. She's going to be on Capitol Hill Monday. That bill will be released on Thursday. So watch for that. I like the bill. I think it's a good move in the right direction. This is an announcement. I just want to make sure. Carolina texted me, said we need to make sure you're all aware. If you're a Democrat, caucus is on March 5th. If you're a Republican, caucus is on March 5th. If you're a Democrat, you're going to have a primary vote for your presidential candidate. If you're a Republican, there's going to be a presidential preference vote. If you want to vote for the presidential race in Utah, you have to attend your caucus. A few years ago, if you remember, we did this with Ted Cruz was our winner. It was the race with Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz came out, but it was a presidential preference vote. That's how Utah is handling the presidential election. So if you want to vote for president, you need to be at your caucus on March 5th. So Democrats are doing a little bit different, but that's how Republicans are doing it.
Representative Thurston?
So I do have one question left here, and I've been researching it, try to understand what is all behind it. Senate Bill 100 is pretty straightforward. It just cleans up the code relating to when a municipality raises taxes for a revenue bond. It's basically cleanup. I mean, it passed the Senate with only one negative vote, and I'm not sure that the guy that voted against it understands it, so it wasn't you.
Are you looking at me?
No. It was.
I'm voting against all your bills, Norm.
It was somebody else. You can look it up. The other bill, House Bill 354, basically takes that concept of that if a city raises a revenue bond, it's going to put on the ballot, that you can challenge that with that has to go to the voters. You can challenge that with a referendum if they don't. 354 basically says that essentially all taxes are subject to referendum, and it may even go further if I'm trying to understand it right, to say that all property taxes increases must be approved by the voters. So I don't know what exactly is going to come out of all of that, but just from a conceptual perspective with local government, and I don't know how many of the city council and mayors like this or hate it, but traditionally it has been one of the checks and balances in our state constitution is that the citizens have a right to weigh in after elected officials have made their decision. It happens to us, it happens to city councils, it happens to others. It's not a particularly great way of running government. If every decision that every elected body made every time had to be put to the voters for their ratification, we'd never get anything done. We'd just be in perpetual state of chaos. But if there are particular issues that are hot button issues that rise to the level that the voters want to weigh in, and there's a way for them to tell their elected officials, hey, this is something we want to weigh in on, our system currently allows for that. And so everybody who's ever been on a city council knows that there are a lot of things that you do that nobody cares about, and you wonder why we're even here. But every once in a while, something comes along that people get really riled up about. And sometimes you can't predict what that's going to be. But if you're raising people's taxes, you can probably predict that they're going to get riled up about that. And so there's a process. Engage people, move the dialogue, help people understand all the way along how that's going to happen. But ultimately, there are issues that need to go to the voters for their say. It's just part of the system. I will tell you that there are certain other people who don't want to do that because they want to be able to go lobby 7 people or 5 people, get a law changed, get something passed, and not have to go. I'll give you an example. This is if you'll permit me, this one from Morgan County, where I grew up. Wasatch Peaks Mountain Resort went to the city or the county and got permission to rezone an entire massive amount of land so that they could put in a ski resort. The citizens of the county didn't think that was such a good idea, and there was this huge fight between the county council and the citizens about whether that was an appropriate thing to do. Ended up in a court battle and all sorts of stuff, but ultimately it got resolved. Had the county council had the foresight to realize this was going to be a big deal and involve the citizens up front before they got into that, it would have saved everybody a lot of time and heartache, probably got the same outcome at the end of the day anyway. So I don't know, there are probably other bills out there on this topic as well, but just know that I do support citizen involvement on hot button issues in an appropriate way.
Thank you. So really quick, I failed to excuse Kevin Johnson, who's the CEO of Mountain View Hospital. He does this a lot, and so I got asked to do it, so hopefully I didn't butcher it too bad today. But I also want to introduce Megan Johnson. Megan, you just stand up really quick, please. I'm going to embarrass you for a second. Megan and I had the opportunity to build the Spanish Fork Hospital, and she was the chief nursing officer, and now she's the CEO of that hospital. To have just a great person lead our community hospital is awesome, and she's going to do everything that I never did, and I'm looking forward to that. And I think Kevin would say the same thing for Mountain View. We are a growing community in South County, and to be able to have 2 great hospitals, and then with Revere Health and Canyon View Clinic, we have great health care here, and it's one of those things we hope you never have to use it. But man, if you wake up and you need it, it's good to have it. And I wanted to recognize those folks for all that they do. Our next meeting like this is on February 24th, and a lot will go on between the first 3 weeks of session. It's just boiling water. If I get in water cold, I don't really notice it, and it kind of gets warm around me. By the next meeting, there's going to be a heck of a lot of stuff that's happened. And I hope that you'll come and bring all of your good, hard questions for these guys and say, what were you thinking? Because that's the way I felt when I was there. I can tell you, with everyone with the exception of Representative Whyte, who replaced me, I've served with those folks. And there are lots of things that go on up there and lots of things that come fast at you. And I could tell you 3 or 4 good qualities about each and every one of them. And we're fortunate to have this event today. I roughly counted 138 people today, and that some may have come and gone, but at one point I counted 138 people here this morning early. I know you only came for the French toast and breakfast, and that's nice. But we are glad that you're here. We're just going to end this, just give each of you 2 minutes, 2.5, 3 minutes. What's on your mind? What do you want to see this session finish like? It's really your time. We'll just finish up. And then at the end, if you have questions, they'll be here for a few minutes as well if you want to just walk up and ask them any questions that didn't get answered. I think we got through the majority of all the questions that were asked. So we'll start with Representative Welton and just kind of work our way down.
Okay, thank you again for all coming out. I think it's so amazing that we have the opportunity to gather together. We appreciate it being filmed and being shared out through Spanish Fork City Network at least. What a great opportunity we have to gather together as citizens in this great country and to participate in the process, to air grievances, to share support, to share ideas. A lot of the legislation that we run comes from you. We have people that come up and say, hey, this is happening and I've got this concern, and we'll look at it and say, oh, you know what? I agree with you. Or maybe that's better run by Representative Whyte, or you know, we each have our own strengths and our own differences. But it's an amazing process, and I am so grateful to live where we are, and I'm grateful for the freedom to vote and to associate. One thing I wanted to say real quick, I've been meaning to say this every time I speak, but I see the scouts back here. It's so refreshing to see scouts. Scouting program is part of why I'm here. The citizenship in the nation and community and those merit badges, I hated them actually when I was a kid because they were a little painful, but because you got to come to meetings like this and you got to sit through them, right? But that helped me gauge an importance and an understanding of the system and a love for the country which we live in. And so I am extremely grateful for my scout leaders, and I'm thankful that we still have some scout leaders who are out there who are bringing their kids to participate in this. You're going to be the leaders of the future, so I look forward to that. I'm grateful to work with such amazing men and ladies at the Capitol. I've got some other fun bills coming up, probably the least important, but my favorite bill is to legalize firecrackers. So I've got that bill coming up. So if you like pyrotechnics, I've got that one. It's not the most life-changing one, but I'm excited for that one. Anyway, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll stick around for a little bit, and I appreciate all of you for coming out, and thank you.
Thank you. It's sure wonderful to be able to serve with this good man here. And with Scouts, my Scoutmaster taught me, leave it better than when you found it. And so I think that's what all of us are here trying to be able to do, to be able to build good things for our children and our grandchildren. So that was a great comment here. The legislature has primarily three responsibilities. One is to create laws, the second is the state budget, and the third is oversight. So we've talked a lot this morning about policy piece of it. There's a budget aspect of it. It's huge and it's very significant. The state budget is about $30 billion every year. And so there is a lot that's happening with budgets right now. To give everyone an update a little bit about budgets, we're being told up here, the kind of the phrase that we're seeing a lot, that this year is going to be a socks and underwear Christmas. And you have to buy your own underwear, which means essentially there's not a lot of money. Now the good news is the economy of Utah is strong. Our inflation is lower compared to a lot of others. We're in a good shape. We have a balanced budget. Things are good financially, and we've even had like about 3% year-over-year growth with the overall budgets. However, there is a lot of requests that are coming to the legislative session right now. Here's a couple of just a quick stats really fast here. There's one-time money, and then there's ongoing money. One-time money, the latest stat I've seen, we have about $267 million one-time money and about $7 million ongoing. That's what's available. A lot of requests are coming in. As a couple of days ago, there were 725 million requested and only 267 million. And with only 7 million available, there was 415 million requests. So you can see the prioritization, and that's not including all of the other needs in the state as well. So that's something that everyone's going to be working on very closely over the next couple of weeks. Of looking at the ballot, you'll still be remained fiscally responsible of a balanced budget and things, but budget is a big piece of it. Just put on everybody's radar that will be happening before our next meeting here. Things are fast and furious up there. There's a lot that's coming. Yesterday morning, I was getting ready to send out my end of week email and newsletter update, and I put at the top of it, week 4 report, and my great legislative intern said, it's week 3. So, there is a lot that's going on. I so much appreciate all of your involvement. I view my responsibility is to represent those in House District 63. And so please continue to reach out to me, call and come to the Capitol and text and email and let me know as your bills that are coming and budget proposals that are doing so I can best represent you. It's just a privilege to be able to be here with you this morning, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Stephen. One of the finest people I know, all of these gentlemen. I will say, so you can sleep well at night knowing, based on what Stephen just said, we have some tough decisions to make financially. I'm on one of the appropriations committees, and we can assure you this: we're not going to spend more money than we have, and we're going to make the tough calls to hold the line. So know that. I wanted to give quickly a shout out to Nebo School District. There's a lot of rhetoric and a lot of talk, and we disagree on things sometimes. But I meet with teachers on a regular basis. Teachers matter. They're the ones that spend the majority of time with our children. They're important. And I can tell you, having served all over the state when I was running health early during COVID, some of the school districts were very difficult to work with. Nebo is a wonderful school district. They listen. Rick Nielsen is a person that I can trust, and you know, we just talked about some of the things that happened up there with Rick. But teachers have told me they're thankful for the pay raise last year, but what they need more than anything is smaller class sizes. And so we're looking at that, finding ways. Actually, some districts are shrinking with population, and so by natural order, the classroom sizes can get smaller if we keep the same number of teachers. So teachers matter. We're working closely with them. Again, we don't always agree on everything, but they're very professional when we disagree. And finally, I would just say this: you know, politics is not a career. If you make it a career, you're probably, it's time to probably go. That's my opinion only. But in a representative democracy or a constitutional republic like this is, this only works if you get involved. And so I am very thrilled to see the number of people here, and I hope some of you will express some interest down the road in running for these offices that are not ours permanently, but for just a short time. So please consider running locally at the state level. We need you. We need good people with common sense. Thanks.
Thank you, and I do serve with remarkable people. Thank you, Francis. You're gonna. Who thinks Francis should come back? Raise your hand. Yeah, I thought we'd get you. People ask me what it's like to serve in the legislature, and last night I got home at 7 o'clock. It had rained all day. Yeah, you're coming back. Yeah, yes. So last night I got home. People always ask, what's it like, right? I get home last night at 7 o'clock, and it's dark, and it rained all day, and I'm worried about, I've got 8 yearlings down at the barn, horses. So I went down there. I knew the water would be pooled up, so I'm down there with a shovel and a headlamp, and the horses started running back and forth. And I like that because I always want my horses to be faster than David's. So they're running back and forth. I'm there with a shovel, and I looked up at the wrong time, and I'll tell you, I just got drilled by a yearling. And I'm laying face down in the mud, and it's not just mud. I mean, I'm covered head to toe. And you know, you get back up, and sometimes it's like that in the legislature, right? And it's like a freight train coming at you all the time. But there are those moments where, you know, you win that bet against Senator Hinkins. It makes it all worth it. So it's a great opportunity to serve. It's a challenge. We do it every day, and we appreciate your involvement. Thank you for being here. I'm gonna stick around for a little while, and then, you know, obviously I gotta go down and see what damage there is at the farm in the light. But thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. And up on the Hill, we're complaining about the budget and not having a lot of money to spend. But I remember in 2009, when Francis and I became involved in the legislature, Mike Morley was my co-chair, and we were over workforce and workforce services, and they told us we had to cut the budget by 15%. Of course, we're going through a recession where everybody's on unemployment, and so how are we going to cut a budget of 15% when everybody's unemployment? And the workforce services never been so busy trying to fill out, workers' comp and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, with the help of Mike, and he'd been there before. I mean, he'd served, so I was new and I had no clue what to do. But thank goodness for him. He bailed us out, and a lady by the name of Kristen Cox, who was blind, and she came from Washington, D.C., and this lady completely computerized the workforce service. A lot of people in rural areas were not happy because they had to let a lot of their employees go that was helping people fill it out, but they became computerized, and it really worked out for the best. So sometimes recessions are really good for a state when we're acting like a bunch of drunken sailors spending money like us. And so to have this, it's really good. And a lot of the people are actually saying thank you that you know, they wanted to cut we're asking them to cut some of the things at the colleges and the schools that aren't necessary. And so we really do need to, you know, run lean and mean as much as possible. We're responsible for your tax dollars. We realize that. We try to be responsible as we can, as if though it was our own. I represent about 70 cities, so I'm not up here as much as I probably should be. I have met with Springville City and Mapleton City with the council and stuff already this year. And but I not only 70 cities that I represent with the counties from Kanab to Heber to Charleston and Daniel and little towns, but I have 7. They call them chapter houses there on the Navajo Nation, and so and these people are really in need of things. And I know a lot of people don't like Senator Romney for the way that he's treated him and Trump have had their spouts back and forth, but you know, he was really instrumental. I ran a bill that we appropriated $8 million for water systems on the Navajo reservation in 2009. And it was finally Senator Romney that helped me get $220 million. At the time that I ran it, it was $150 million that it would take for these water projects from the San Juan River to get water to those on the reservation. And he was able to get us $220 million. And that's in the process now of getting water to these poor souls that live out there, and they haul water with their little trucks with 50-gallon drums. And by the time they get there, half the water's gone. And we have a third world nation in our state, and for him to step up and do that, for him, this is his last. He's going out this year, and I think a lot of people badmouth him, but he's done a lot of good, and I just want to thank him publicly for what he's done for my people and in my area. Thanks.
Thank you. I just want to echo the comments. I know Senator McKell and I give each other a hard time every now and then, but we love each other like brothers. We do. Even if he doesn't like dogs, that's all right. No, this has been a great experience for me. This is my 10th session. I didn't anticipate doing it this long when I first started. And people say, "Why do you keep doing it?" And I was like, "Because there's still more. I have more to give. There's more gas in the tank." I know Francis understands this. There is a time for every one of us where you recognize that it's time to move on, and that there is no more gas in the tank. Senator Hinkins looks like he's got 4 years of gas left in his tank. And I appreciate everybody who's willing to do this, because at the end of the day, if you look at this, no one should want to do this. The stress, the grief, the downsides are pretty significant. But what makes people actually willing to do it is this. It's being able to come and meet the people. It's being able to meet these people and work together with them. I sit next to Doug Welton, and we have great conversations all day long. It's fantastic, and to be able to have those discussions with people that you can learn to love and respect, that's what makes it all worth it. It's just a fabulous opportunity. One thing I am looking forward to this session, we will have more continuing with deregulation. This is probably going to be a banner year for getting the government out of your business. And I'm just looking for more and more bills that I can support that will have. I'm sure there's a whole raft coming from the Senate. I'm just excited about it. All the good bills coming from the Senate. So if that's something that's important to you, keep your eye on those bills, push behind them, just making life better by having less government in your life, not more. So that's my concluding remark.
Hey, thank you, everybody. Last thing I would just add is my mom had a saying growing up, many of you have heard it before, some of you. There are two types of people. There are consumers and there are producers. And she said the longer she lives, she recognizes that producers just wake up every day and they try to make their communities better. And sometimes the consumers just get up and they complain about the way it was produced. Are you a complainer or are you a doer? The fact that we have 138 people here, we have some young men in their scout uniforms and youth that come to these things. There are a lot of other places you could be at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning, but thank you for coming. We'll do this again on the 24th. Breakfast will be here again, and it's just really an opportunity to be engaged. If you don't like what's being made in the kitchen, get off your rear and go to the kitchen and try to make something else happen. And so with that, thank you all for being here. representatives and senators. I know it's a Saturday morning. I know when I served, Saturdays were cherished because it was an opportunity for me to catch up on what I didn't have before. But please feel free to visit with them, but be respectful of their time as well as they get back to their family or go get kicked by a horse or whatever they need to do. So thank you. Have a great day.